In this video, we are going to look at two important things. One is Java EE server and Java EE container. Now, whenever we have any application, anything that is to be deployed, how do we deploy it? We have a server. On that server, we have multiple different containers. And inside the containers, we will load our modules, we will load our applications. So that is how it works. So, सबसे पहले, what is Java EE server? So it is a server application that implements the Java EE platform APIs and it provides standard Java EE services. Now, it is also called as application server just because it allows serving application data to the clients. Okay, just as web servers, they serve web pages to the web browsers, this is also called as application server or also called as Java EE server. Now, it will host several application component types that correspond to tiers in a multi-tiered application. So, what are the tiers? We have already seen that in for 1 tier, 2 tier, 3 tier architectures, right? So, whether it is the GUI part or whether it is the business processing part, or whether it is the database part, multiple things can come on the application server or Java EE server. Now, when the deployment process is going on, the Java EE application is installed inside Java EE container. The containers are placed inside Java EE server. Now, the server is used as a runtime portion for the execution of application, which either contains web containers or EJB containers or applet containers, etc. Now, we slowly go to the concept of Java EE container. Now you can have a separate question on Java EE containers or the question can be asked along with Java EE servers. So see what is asked and accordingly answer. Now when I talk of container, what is a container? Container provides you an interface between the component and the low-level platform-specific functionality that will support your component. So what are the different types of the containers that we have? We have application client container, we have applet container, we have web container, and we have EJB container. These are the types of containers that we have. Now, whenever I have a Java EE module that needs to be deployed, I cannot deploy it directly on the server. I first put it in the container and then the container goes on the server. Okay. Now, Java EE application components use the protocols and methods of the container to access other application components or the services which are provided by the Java EE server. So, the container acts as a middleman between your program and the server or other components or other application services which are provided. Okay, now what are the services which are provided by the container to the component? The very first one, it allows configuring of the web component or the enterprise bean so that only authorized users can access the system resources. So that is the first important thing. Second, it allows you to specify the relationship amongst the methods that make up a single transaction so that all methods in one transaction are treated as a single unit. So in short, it is giving you transaction support. Next, it provides unified interface to multiple naming and directory services. You know, we are going to see JNDI, Java Naming and Directory Interface. So whatever naming and directory services are there in your, that you are going to implement, so the access to those services is provided by the container. Any low-level communication that happens between the client and the enterprise bean, invoking the method. So, enterprise beans have callback methods. The invocation of these callback methods is done by the container and not by the client. So, the container also manages certain services of enterprise beans and servlet life cycles. It also manages database connection, resource pooling. It also manages data persistent. It allows you to access Java EE platform API, so on and so forth. So this was the answer for container and the services which are provided by the container. Now, I already told you what are the different types of containers. So let us see the explanation for the types of containers. The first container that we have is Enterprise Java Bean Container, also called as EJB container. Now EJB itself is a server-side technology. So EJB container is also a server-side component architecture. Why is EJB used? The basic need of EJB is to allow the developers to develop modular applications, or the applications that are made up of various components. So EJB container will handle all the aspects of Enterprise Beans operation within your application server. An EJB container acts as a middleman. It acts as an intermediary. Intermediary matlab middleman. No? Middleman between the user written business logic within the bean and rest of the application server environment. Now, whether it is, execution of the Java beans, or it is providing access to the local and remote, interfaces of the Java beans, everything is handled by the container. Now, when I talk of Enterprise Java beans, they are divided into three types. One is session beans. Session beans are transient objects. They are short-lived objects, processes, and they are typically used by a single client. So, apart from singleton session bean, which is concurrently used by multiple clients. So, session beans, they are divided into stateless, stateful, and singleton. Okay. Entity beans, they represent persistent data which is maintained in the database. So when we are going to see Unit 5 chapters, we will come across entity beans. And lastly is message driven beans, which asynchronously pass messages to application modules and services. Okay, so message driven beans are the beans that responds to the user's messages. User will send the messages to the JMS queue or topic. The message driven bean will listen to those messages, and then depending on the message content, it will act on it. Now, next thing that we have is a web container. What is a web container? The web application that we have will run inside the web container. Okay, now web container is also called as web servlet container. Now, whether it is JSP program or a servlet program, it will run inside web container. So, web container will provide you same services as your JSP container. Okay. Now, all these web components, whether it is servlet, it is JSP, they run inside their respective containers on the Java EE server. Okay. Now, web server is a server which is capable of handling your HTTP request, which is sent by the client. They generate the HTTP response and they give the response back to the client. Now, what is application client container? To host the application components or your application clients, the application client container is used. Now, the name itself tells you that this is going to run on the client machine. It is going to run on the client computer. Okay. Now, these containers, they help the developers to create robust Java applications which also have access to the Java EE resources like, data sources or EJBs, etc. Now, as the name suggests, the container is going to manage the execution of the application client components. Okay, so application clients and their containers, that is the application client container, will run on the client machine. Okay, this is again the reiteration of our second point. Okay. Now, whatever are the application operations that are going on between your user and the database will be handled by the application client container. Now, lastly, we have something that is called as applet container. Now, applet container supports applet programming model. Now, applet container executes applets, and when it is executing the applets, it supports, or rather it uses sandbox security model, so that applets will not be allowed to access the system resources or cause any harm. So whatever execution takes place, it takes place in that confined sandbox. Okay, so sandbox security model means that ki whatever things are accessed by the applets, no other program or no other resource will be harmed due to it. Okay, that is the simple explanation of what is sandbox. The applet container ensures security and portability if it runs in an applet. That's it for this answers. Thank you.